So welcome, everyone. My name is Eileen Murphy, and I'm the Vice President for Government Relations at New Jersey Audubon, who is sponsoring this webinar this afternoon. I'm so excited to see so many of you joining us today to talk about how informal educators can be critical resources for classroom teachers as you think about how to incorporate climate change into your classrooms. A little bit on Zoom housekeeping before we actually get started. We're using the webinar format with the Q&A box to ask questions. You can put your questions in there at any time during the webinar, but we'll address them all at the end of the panel discussion. If your question's for a specific panelist or for the First Lady, please indicate that. Otherwise, we'll pose the question to the whole panel and they can determine who might be the best match. The format for the webinar is that the First Lady will talk briefly about the climate change education initiative that she has spearheaded in New Jersey, and will introduce our esteemed panel members, all of whom are involved in environmental education in New Jersey and have been working in that space for years, if not decades. Indeed, they are leaders in the field. And as you all know, New Jersey is the first state in the country to incorporate climate change standards into the K through 12 classroom using a truly interdisciplinary approach, and we'll hear more about that today. I do want to thank Stephanie Lagos, who is the First Lady's Chief of Staff, for helping to organize the whole webinar, and to Lillian Armstrong from our own education department at New Jersey Audubon for her technical expertise with Zoom. We really need her. So now it's my pleasure to introduce First Lady Tammy Murphy. The First Lady's upbringing, career, and worldview have been consistently shaped and defined by family, education, service, and leadership. She's worked with nonprofit and other organizations focused on the environment, education, healthcare, youth and family services, as well as the arts and transatlantic relations. She's also worked in finance, both at home and in Europe, and she partnered with her husband in representing the United States during his appointment as U.S. Ambassador to Germany from 2009 through 2013. Upon returning back to the U.S., together they founded a think tank to explore ways to help grow the middle class and jumpstart New Jersey's economy. Throughout the campaign and transition, and now again as First Lady, she's been energized and inspired by the stories she's heard from fellow New Jerseyans as she's traveled throughout the state. Utilizing her experience in the private and nonprofit sectors, she hopes to develop solutions to some of the problems that were shared with her. The First Lady earned a BA degree in English and Communications from the University of Virginia and currently sits on the university's Board of Visitors. She also serves as secretary and is a charter member of the Climate Reality Action Fund, an organization founded by former VP Al Gore. We are so pleased that climate change education was one of the First Lady's early and successful initiatives. Her success in this sphere is what has led us here today. Her vision, coupled with her skill in bringing people together from different disciplines, is to develop ways to educate students about preserving the environment and combating climate change. To quote her from a recent interview on State of the Affairs with Steve Adubato, "The future leaders and policymakers of our world are our children. We are handing them a real problem. And if we don't educate them and teach them and give them the tools so that they understand this here and now, then we are really not being only disrespectful, but we are being negligent." May I present and welcome a diplomat, financier, leader, advocate, and wife and mother, First Lady Tammy Murphy. Turning it over to you, First Lady.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Eileen, for that incredible introduction. It is always a pleasure to meet another Murphy, let there be no doubt. I, of course, want to thank New Jersey Audubon for your incredible work in conservation and raising awareness of environmental issues, as well as for the invitation to be a part of today's program. I am incredibly excited to begin this discussion, but before we open up the panel, I want to give you a brief overview of where climate change education in New Jersey currently stands and what our hopes are for New Jersey's students. As you just heard, this past June, our state's educational system became the first in the nation to recognize that climate change is a real, tangible problem that this generation of children will be required to face, and further, that it's our duty to prepare them for that certain future. Beginning in the 2021-22 school year, climate change education will be incorporated across all core subjects from kindergarten through high school graduation, and every New Jersey student will be prepared to explore, imagine, and advocate for the innovative solutions needed in the communities in which they all live. Nelson Mandela once said, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world." And here in New Jersey, that is a sentiment that we wholeheartedly embrace. We have the #1 education system in the country. We value a commitment to academic rigor and the pursuit of knowledge. We believe in the power that education holds to change the course of a person's life. And we know that our educational professionals do more than educate. They teach our students to be good citizens. Our collective mission, resolving the damage that human activity has done to the environment since the 19th century, is an incredible burden that our children and grandchildren will have to face. The adoption of these standards is much more than an added educational requirement. It's a symbol of a partnership between generations. And together, we will begin to undo the damage we have caused. And for our students in environmental justice communities who suffer most deeply the effects of air pollution, the climate crisis is even more personal. Climate change is not just an environmental issue. It is a social justice and equity issue as well. This will be an important part of the conversation as our children grow and become the future leaders and policymakers of our world. We are handing them a real problem that has perhaps already affected their health and will certainly continue to affect every aspect of their lives. If we don't educate them and give them the tools that they need to understand the dangers of climate change and how to combat it, no matter what career they pursue, then I believe we are being borderline negligent. New Jersey is on its way to achieving 100% clean energy by the year 2050. And I have no doubt that with our best in the nation public school system, our students will be well equipped to take on the future green economy as artists, entrepreneurs, city planners, insurance brokers, and more. But a lot of work remains to determine how best to implement these standards. And that is what we are here to discuss today. So let's get started. My first question is for Dale Rosselette, who has been with New Jersey Audubon since 1983. She is an educator with extensive experience teaching preschool, elementary, and secondary grades in both formal and non-formal situations, including as New Jersey Audubon's Vice President for Education. Dale currently chairs the New Jersey Commission for Environmental Education and is past president of the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education. Ms. Rosselette has been recognized with several awards, including the 2013 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education, and she has co-authored several ecology-based curriculum guides. Welcome, Dale. My first question is this: what are some of the examples of partnerships or key collaborations that have already occurred between schools and these more non-traditional educators, and why were they so successful?
Well, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here today and so pleased to be here with you, Mrs. Murphy, and of course, our esteemed panelists. You know, in order to prepare young people to help mitigate the effects of climate change, there has to be an all hands on deck approach. So we are so thankful for this administration's vision and proactive measures, because of course, ignoring climate change is just not an option. So when we start thinking about partnerships and collaborations, it's really difficult to prepare for global changes and the local impacts of climate change if we're thinking only in very single-mindedness. It's incredibly important to build those effective partnerships about what you had asked. And the best collaborations occur when there's a diversity of people at the table, bringing together different expertise and opinions, and of course, different access to lots of resources. So when we think about working directly with teachers, folks that are in the non-formal education space, which is what I would consider myself to be, and many of the panelists here, we really want to think about making sure that the right people are sitting at the table to move forward in a programmatic way. So I'm going to give you one example. Several years ago, New Jersey Audubon worked with a great group of folks on a project entitled Building Ecological Solutions for Coastal Community Hazards. Yes, it's a mouthful, I understand that, but essentially we were brought into this project through the National Wildlife Federation as their state affiliate. And NWF has been an amazing national partner, bringing a plethora of resources and expertise to New Jersey. The entire project was in partnership with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and the funding was provided by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation related to Hurricane Sandy. The project had several goals, right? They were all community-based. And the part that New Jersey Audubon participated in was to create a free online curriculum resource for middle school and high school teachers. It included background information on coastal resiliency. It provided integrative learning strategies around STEM and STEAM, and then provided ecological design challenges for real-world problems from various communities around the state. What was really cool about this project is that we collaborated with the New Jersey School Boards Association. We collaborated with NJDEP's environmental education staff to design and deliver this comprehensive framework about how to engage students in identifying real-life environmental problems, designing ecological solutions to those problems, and then figuring out how to conduct some long-term monitoring. But our team essentially represented that non-formal space, the people that don't teach in the classroom. So it was really essential for us to work side by side with practicing teachers to make sure that the finished product was usable. So we worked with teachers from around the state, including from Chatham High School. Missy Holzer is on the call today as a panelist. We worked with the Cape May County Technical School, Ocean City High School, and many others. And the reason why this collaboration was so successful is that we each brought an expertise to bear on the subject, whether it was the ecological background, the curriculum design experience, or the actual in the classroom experience. And all of these things needed to be woven together to make that final product relevant and useful for the teachers as well as the students. Additionally, the other reason why this particular project was so successful is that it was fully funded. As I said earlier, implementing climate change is going to be an all hands on deck situation. So in order for us to implement climate change education within our wonderful educational system, there is going to need to be meaningful financial investment from private funding, government and foundation grants, and/or philanthropic support, especially for all of the many non-formal organizations to fully participate. So this is only just one such collaboration, and there's hundreds of other ones out there where non-formal educators and classroom teachers have come together to really create meaningful situations where children have the ability to learn from real life and be able to apply those skills across the board. So thank you for asking that question as the kickoff for our discussion today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dale, for that. I know it'll be incredibly helpful as we move forward to implement these standards. Okay, my next question is for Olivia Glenn, who currently serves as the Deputy Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Drawing from her almost 2 decades of experience in government, advocacy, and education, Olivia provides executive leadership for the DEP's offices overseeing environmental justice, equal opportunity and public contract assistance, diversity, inclusion and outreach, community collaborative initiative, and environmental education. She does a lot. Olivia previously served as a member of the Department of Environmental Protection's Environmental Justice Advisory Council leading its efforts in outreach, education, and land management. Welcome, Olivia. Wonderful to see you again. Olivia, New Jersey is a highly diverse state, both in landscape, mountains to beaches, to farms, to pine barrens, as well as people. Are there any other avenues of non-traditional environmental education that can be utilized to inform teachers and students?
Good afternoon, and First Lady Murphy, it is a delight to be with you again. So thank you so much. And good afternoon to each of my colleagues who are also on this panel, and thank you to New Jersey Audubon for organizing this today. It's a very timely conversation. So to answer your question, the greatest threats to the environment are not pollution, global warming, or deforestation, but ignorance and apathy. A person must understand and connect with an issue in order to care about it and respond to it. People in New Jersey love our parks, forests, and historic sites, and students can use them as learning laboratories to explore and understand the outdoors. Teachers can schedule a class trip with a naturalist or a historian at a state park, forest, or historic site at many locations across the state. Whether it's one of our naturalists at High Point State Park and Island Beach State Park, or a historian at Rockingham Historic Site or Walt Whitman House. Historians and naturalists lead groups through many ecosystem types, and we talk about the importance and impacts of climate change in each of these locations. History is important to climate change as well, as places of settling in modern America have largely been shaped by natural resources. In addition to our staff at our state parks, forests, and historic sites, we also have a number of programs, including watershed ambassadors, and they're a part of the AmeriCorps program. And in each watershed management area in the state, there is a designated watershed educator that provides non-traditional educational opportunities to citizens, school groups, and other interested parties. And they really tailor what they do for that particular watershed management area, whether it's the Highlands and Pinelands, our inner cities, or the Jersey Shore. So we're really lucky with the plethora of complementary resources that we have in the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Olivia. My next question is for Missy Holzer, a former classroom science teacher who's been involved in science standards writing in New Jersey since 2008, when the first major revision took place. So during the creation of the next generation science standards, she served on the New Jersey Lead State Review Team and assisted with transitioning formal and non-formal educators in the implementation process. She also assisted in our most recent standards review process where climate science and climate change were included. Hurrah, thank you so much for that. She currently works for Great Minds PBC as a standards review specialist for their PhD science program. Missy, what have the non-formal educators been doing to prepare as they look to support classroom teachers, and how can teachers and supervisors plug into this non-formal community?
Thank you so much for joining us and hosting this webinar. It's a pleasure to have you. It's such an important topic, and thanks to Audubon and the panelists for creating this space for participants to pick up on some terrific ideas on how to plug in with non-formals. First, I'd like to mention that those connections that are organic and local will be the most effective and efficient ways for non-formals to connect with district educators and curricula. Here's a list of possible curricular connections for each one of the disciplines. I'm going to start with science. I know that's the obvious one, but it's also one where I think we can find some real germane examples. And also where we find a natural fit with climate change education, as our nature centers and our nonprofit outreach organizations, such as watershed institutes and conservation groups, are already on the ground running with initiatives to address local impacts of climate change through their missions of their organizations. So examples for curricular fit include the development of curricular, and problem-based learning and case-based learning are two wonderful natural fits around their initiatives, such as coastal restoration and land conservation, are wonderful. In addition, these groups likely have ongoing data records on land use change and phenology that can be utilized by local science and math educators. For example, in a classroom project, a team of my students focused on changes in the number of sightings of migratory birds in our area over time, and the data was compiled by trained citizen scientists and non-formal educators. And again, the key is not to forget our local environmental and resources where we can challenge students to identify and address local impacts, as well as identify the roles of preserving specific landscapes to protect our resources such as wetlands. And now also cannot mention engineering design challenges. They're a perfect fit for students where non-formals can truly engage the creativity of our students. In math, our naturalists and outreach specialists can work with math teachers to find ways to integrate climate change into their curricula. If available, they can provide various change over time data, develop models using data to predict future changes, and connect with science educators on math applications associated with science investigations. All levels of probability and statistics, whether it's lower elementary right up through high school, serve as perfect entry points for students to wrestle with climate science and climate change data. In English language arts, many of our non-formal educators are well versed in the nature writing English language arts genre and can can assist English language arts teachers with identifying appropriate literature to support the integration of climate change in English language arts curricula, if it's not already there. In addition, many of our nature center type venues serve as perfect retreat locations, which can inspire our students as they consider their backyards in a climate change world. In addition to the nature writing genre, communication is another area where non-formals may assist classroom educators in incorporating climate change in their curriculum. Non-formals can teach students about effective ways to communicate with the general public. Communication is a key to the effectiveness of our non-formal venues. If they need to get the word out about who they are, their mission, or their initiative. So they're wonderful people to assist with communication. In social studies, I know Olivia just mentions our historians across the state in our venues. That's terrific. We have many overlooked historical museums and they offer assets to our state. We often overlook them, the nuances, the stories that they can tell about the past, how a storm may have influenced a battle or changes in the existence of populations in certain regions caused by changes in climate or access to resources. Non-formal educators can certainly highlight those climate connections and connect them with contemporary issues related to climate change, such as extending droughts, violent storms, environmental justice issues, climate refugees. All of these are very important. In health and phys ed, although our naturalists may provide insights into social emotional care, this is where I want to introduce this notion that there are non-formal educators who don't know they're non-formal educators, such as farmers and nutritionists. Those professionals can play an important role in messaging about our food supply and diet and how they're connected to climate and therefore climate change. In world language, effective communication with all populations in New Jersey is a key to a united front in combating climate change. Our world language educators could work with non-formals within the multilingual communities to ensure messaging is inclusive and accurate. Within the arts, we have so many amazing venues for the arts across the state, whether they're community-based, semi-professional, professional. Those non-formal educators may work with our fine and performing arts students to collaborate on initiatives that highlight student voice, where climate change serves as a context. Business. There are climatologists and environmental scientists working within our business sector who focus on climate change and how those impacts may affect commodities as well as real estate. This is yet another example of those non-formal educators who do not realize that they're non-formal educators. There are many existing curricula that connect other disciplines to the environment, which can serve as a starting point in making connections between formal and non-formal educators. Some examples include the population connection and project learning tree, wet and wild. Finally, we need to view this as an opportunity to turn our curricula around and focus on our students as learners who are living in a changing world and truly assess what is important in preparing them for the future they are currently living. Our non-formal educators have diverse perspectives that naturally integrate all disciplines, and they should be tapped as valuable resources when adapting local curricula. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Missy. As a former classroom science teacher, I know you have a unique insight into how to best support our educators, so that's great. Okay, our next question is from Mike Shadrock, who has been an active member of the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education for over a decade and is currently serving his second term as co-president. Working in the field of education in New Jersey for over 20 years, he has taught hundreds of students in grades K at 5 to 12. He currently serves as the Associate Director of the Upper School and Director of Sustainability at Farbrook School. In 2013, Mike received the Watershed Institute's Award for Excellence in Environmental Education. Welcome, Mike. So what are some ready-to-use climate science resources that teachers and supervisors can use as foundational information in building the appropriate units and lessons for children spanning all grades?
All right. Well, thank you, First Lady Murphy, for all the work you're doing in our state and beyond with climate change. And it's a pleasure to be here with you today, as well as my colleagues on the panel. For starters, I think we need to define environmental sustainability. And essentially, it's about finding a balance between the health of our planet and its biodiversity, the health of human beings, and maintaining economic stability. And if I may, Mrs. Murphy, last week during one of your husband's daily briefings, he mentioned the passing of Mark Bedron, a sustainable education and green buildings visionary. Mark was a former president of the State Board of Education and co-founder of the Willow School, where I had the privilege of having Mark as a mentor during the 5 years that I worked at Willow. So of course, my condolences go out to all of his family and friends, and each of us he educated in so many ways. One of the ways in which Mark approached his decision-making was through the lens of systems thinking, particularly when it comes to environmental sustainability. Systems don't operate in a vacuum, right? Systems interact with other systems, and truth is our planet and everything on it is just one big system. So beyond just curriculum, what are the systems of a school district, a school, a single school, a community that need to be examined when looking through the lens of environmental sustainability? Well, I often break it down into the essentials for living a healthy life: clean air, clean water, clean soil, clean food, and thriving biodiversity. So if you've ever attended an Angie conference, right, most workshops about these ideas are given by educators, both formal and non-formal, from the incredible organizations and schools around our state. So in order to really answer the question about the relationship between climate change and environmental sustainability in our schools, and making sure the conversation is rooted in science that's accessible to everyone, I'm going to just break down the idea of clean air for a moment. So our atmosphere, the air that we breathe, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, less than 1% argon. These three gases account for approximately 99.93% of our air. There are other trace gases such as water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, helium, hydrogen, and ozone, which are part of the last 0.07%. Right? The greenhouse effect is the way in which heat is trapped close to the surface of the earth by these greenhouse gases. Right? These heat trapping gases can be thought of as a blanket wrapped around the earth, which keeps it warmer and cozier than it would be without them. But we don't want this to be an electric blanket that gets dialed up every couple of years. So scientists know that 350 parts per million is a safe number of CO2 or carbon dioxide particles in the overall concentration of the gases in our atmosphere. As that number increases, and right now we're at about 415 parts per million, more heat gets trapped in the atmosphere. This in turn, of course, leads to more evaporation, which means more water vapor, which means temperatures rising, right? And by definition, trace means barely discernible. Yet these trace gases are the very greenhouse gases that essentially determine the temperature and climate of our planet. So if you add just a trace more, the effects become very discernible. And where do the overwhelming numbers of CO2 being put into our atmosphere come from? Well, mainly from burning fossil fuels for transportation, creating electricity, and operating building systems. But burning fossil fuels also then puts in carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, lead, etc. So just from combustion, we are jeopardizing the stability of our planet's health. We are permitting those byproducts into the air for our lungs to breathe in. And if the biodiversity falls out of balance because of this, there's going to be an external cost: healthcare costs, agricultural losses, storms affecting tourism. Point being, there's an economic instability. And this is just combustion, right? We're not even talking about extraction, refining, storing, shipping. None of this fits into the tenets of environmental sustainability. So many schools and districts, recognizing their role in the protection of our youngest human species, are not just teaching atmospheric science, but also talking about alternative alternative energy sources and switching to them. Solar panels, wind turbines, biofuels, geothermal energy. These are systems that are being incorporated into building operations and then naturally being reintegrated into the curriculum. Thus, right, we're getting students to think about even better and more sustainable energy solutions than what we even have now. Often, schools are partnering with non-formal educators in both the standards piece of the curriculum and in finding ways to economically switch to alternative fuel sources. And often it's by utilizing the creativity and determination of the students themselves to make the change. Schools I know are also running campaigns for no idling for buses and cars at pickup, and carpooling campaigns, and turning off lights and unplugging unused electronics, planting rooftop gardens, meeting with local and statewide legislators. They're thinking and acting in the best interest of a healthy planet, healthy people, and economic stability. But here's the good news, is that this has been going on for New Jersey for decades. Right? The Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education, the School of Conservation, Audubon, Sustainable New Jersey, the Watershed Institute, Duke Farms, the Pinelands Institute, the Wetlands Institute. I mean, everywhere we have zoos, parks, the DEP, the list is huge. Non-formal resources in New Jersey are doing this work and partnering with public and private schools to educate about the issues of environmental sustainability in order to tackle the issues of global warming. And now with these climate standards, it's just going to bring it all together.
Thank you so much, Mike. You're absolutely right. I've traveled around New Jersey and seen so many of these incredible initiatives in our schools that were happening before the new standards were integrated. So I completely agree with you on all. Thank you. That was really helpful. Okay, so our next question is actually directed to Dale, Missy, and Mike. So I would like to ask you to self-select your order in answering the following. What does a fully integrated climate science learning experience even look like?
Well, I'll start. I'll just jump right in there and start. I think given that what we've been talking about and what everybody has been hearing, you can say that something that is fully integrated is not compartmentalized, right? So we really want to make sure that students are having an actual real life experience where they're able to craft or encourage questions that are coming from the students themselves. Those questions could lead to further research, they lead to more questions. So this is part of that iterative process that we want children to be going through as they're viewing the world around them. For example, we were working with a school here in southern New Jersey that is on the coastline, and it just ended up that their school fronted or backed up against coastal dunes. So their kids have seen lots and lots of coastal flooding. They've really been a part of that whole process. But the kids also had seen lots of monarch butterflies. So you might not think about the two things connecting very well, but they were able to take their students out to learn more about monarch butterflies, about the migration of the butterflies, how people actually tag the butterflies through lots of different ways. Especially we have a group down here by New Jersey Audubon that actually do catch and tag the butterflies and keep lots of data about them. So they learned about the migration, they monitored the migration. They realized that monarchs relied on seaside goldenrod, which is this gorgeous plant in the autumn while they were migrating. It's a nectar plant. And then some of the students realized after looking at where they live that the seaside goldenrod grew in the dunes near their school. And it grew in the dunes, its roots helped hold the sand in place. And so the action they wanted to end up taking was to grow and plant more seaside goldenrod to help the monarchs, but also to stabilize the dunes. So what I'm getting at here is that by students being able to actually go out and experience nature, to be able to pose their own questions, and then be able to do the research, all relies on the fact that we as non-formal educators can give them some of the things that they need in order to really understand how everything, as Mike was saying, is integrated as one big process and one big system. So, and I know, Missy, we were talking about the process in the school itself. So maybe if you want to jump in here to talk about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I just want to focus a little bit slightly different angle on the question and just kind of mention that our course silos need to come down. That life is not siloed and impacts of climate change are not siloed. I would suggest that what we want to do is start with the school culture. We want a culture that's going to be supportive of educators and of students as they try to accomplish solutions, get to those solutions for climate change. And then what I think what's going to happen is that we're going to have these organic ideas that are going to come out, and we're going to have these wonderful networks of students, of teachers, and these projects moving forward and being accomplished because we're in that supportive environment. We have teams of teachers that may brainstorm with non-formals. So for instance, within my setting, I networked with the Great Swamp Watershed Association over years. And we were connected in the front end of the school year, the back end of the school year, and continually made those connections with the students to get out in the field, ask those questions that Dale had mentioned, ask those questions and answer them themselves, come up with solutions that are community-driven solutions to problems, environmental problems. So it starts out with a culture, that feeling within the school that, yeah, this is the way we want to go, but then it's going to take that organic give and take between the teachers and reaching outside of the comforts of the classroom and of the building and reaching into the community and pulling all the resources together, such as working with different local stakeholders, such as the Watershed Association, the Environmental Commission, and bringing all these people on board.
Yeah, and I would just to add on to that, I mean, you know, I think it's important to always keep in mind that the students are at the center of what we do. So as Dale said, and as Missy said, you know, asking questions, let them ask questions, let the students be explorers. And I think it's really important to dissect the information that they may have been exposed to. Like, don't dismiss it just because it doesn't fit in with what we are trying to teach them about climate change or global warming. You know, I have students that bring up, because they've seen it, they have access to so much information. Well, what about, you know, the history of the earth? There's always been cycles of climate change. And what about, you know, this idea of global cooling or solar cycles? I think it's important to explore those and have them understand the validity of those ideas, but how it doesn't pertain to what we're necessarily facing right now. Focus on the impacts of decision-making. Really, really help them trust science. Putting all of these together, you can create some amazing units. I was talking just the other day, Kendra Mintz, who used to work at the Liberty Science Center, was telling me about a program she created for a civics-minded STEM high school. And during her unit on climate change, and it was with a challenging group of students, she had said, she had decided to try to make it interactive. She made a card-based role-playing game where students had to work cooperatively to decide how their city would react to changing climate. So these 9th grade students had to work together to debate risk against the cost benefits of inaction, while also balancing the interest of the group against their personal role self-interest to achieve different win scenarios. She said seeing them have fun with the game, but also taking it seriously was so amazing. And by the end of this unit, the students were more informed about climate change, but also were aware of how their community is impacted, largely managed by a team of local officials. So, you know, when you can, you know, bring science together with creativity and fun, you know, anything is possible.
Great. That sounds incredibly exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of this come to fruition as we move forward. Okay, Olivia, you have our final question, which builds on our previous question. What opportunities are there for the organizations, agencies, and businesses that non-formals represent to help train students for the types of green jobs that will be forthcoming in the future?
So while we may consider green jobs to be the ones that have a direct impact on the environment, green jobs can be defined as any job that is modified slightly by the environmental impacts that they cause. All jobs modified in this way can be green if the impacts on the environment are considered. At DEP, we have a few opportunities to train students. One I mentioned briefly earlier was the Watershed Ambassadors Program, where we have workshops that are available in each of the watershed management areas that are tailored to a particular location's natural resources. One of my favorites are the seasonal employment opportunities that we have available in the Division of Parks and Forestry. We have seasonals who can work as natural and historic educators, as well as visitor service assistants, office workers, maintenance workers, and lifeguards. And so while those other positions are not directly teaching opportunities, they are definitely incredible opportunities to learn about our state's rich natural and historic resources. And it really gives a good insight to the full-time and volunteer opportunities that are available within the State Park Service. And it gives a really good insight into some of what our stewardship challenges are and things that we need to do in perpetuity to protect those resources for the public. DEP also has a growing list of educational resources, and I saw in the Q&A that Mark Rogoff, who works in our environmental education office at DEP, was providing a lot of links. Some of those resources that relate directly to climate change include our SEEDS website at DEP. So it's nj.gov/DEP/seeds. And again, you can go check the Q&A as Mark Rogoff dropped a lot of those resources right in there. Within those resources that we have on the SEEDS website, there is a curriculum module on climate resiliency that have examples of projects conducted by schools at various locations along the coastline. Sounds a lot like what Dale was talking about. We also have some lessons from organizations such as the EPA, NASA, USGS, and many others. And also just something to keep in mind, environmental education does not always require a trip to an official park, though I love them so much. You can bring nature into the classroom through Project Wild, Project Wet, and Project Learning Tree curriculum guides. Educators can use these guides and just the tree on the street corner to broaden students' understanding of environmental issues. And I've actually done that myself. I am a trained Project Learning Tree facilitator, as well as Hooked on Fishing, Not on Drugs. And I've applied these opportunities in field locations like our Forest Resource Education Center in Jackson. But I've also done it in cities like Camden, working with their elementary school teachers just to show them nature right around them and how they can use those opportunities to teach children and to train them about career possibilities. Those workshops that are provided for the public and for educators, they provide guides, and many of these trainings are sponsored by DEP itself and sometimes our partner organizations. They're held live and virtually around the state all throughout the year. All of those lessons are also correlated to state and national education standards. They focus on STEM and are low cost and very easy to use. You can also sign up for environmental education news to get the times and dates of these workshops and more on that wonderful resourceful SEEDS website. And then of course, organizations that are on this call, like New Jersey Audubon and others offer guided educational opportunities at little or no cost. Staff are trained to facilitate natural learning outside and inside the classrooms, and they're experts in presenting materials and opportunities that lead to understanding, caring, action, and a sense of the careers that are available.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Olivia. It's amazing how many resources we have across the state already, which is fantastic. Okay, so at this point, we have some audience questions, and I am going to kick it off by asking the first one that is from Magdalena, who would like to know if any of you have collaborated with urban planners and engineers for student projects, both coastal or non-coastal. I just want to preface this by saying we have about 8 to 10 minutes left, so try and keep your answers short if you can.
I can jump in there because it seems like perhaps what I was talking about earlier, the particular program called Building Ecological Solutions, there were several parts to that project that was a couple of years ago. And one of the parts was actually working with urban planners on those kinds of things. We were using not only teacher professional development and a curriculum to come up with ideas that students could implement right there in their own communities, but we were using communities from around the state to provide scenarios where students could test their urban planning and do some design engineering around the problems that these particular communities had and were trying to solve. So that was the Building Ecological Solutions curriculum, Olivia, that you mentioned in your remarks, that is now posted on the DEP website. So people can go and check that out as well. Thanks for that question, Magdalena.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Julia, who would like to know what opportunities exist to create interdisciplinary projects in the curriculum, weaving the different aspects across subjects.
I can jump in on that. And I saw that question. I thought it was really great. One of the things I'm always mindful of in K-12 learning opportunities, especially for middle schoolers and high schoolers, is that they have volunteer opportunities that they need to fulfill. And I often find that those volunteer opportunities are really interdisciplinary. So it connects to content area, but it also connects to being civically engaged and just building their empathy and engagement in their community. So I think that volunteer opportunities are one of the real opportunities to have that kind of experience.
And if I could also add to that, so as the Alliance for New Jersey Environmental Education, which has been around now for 35 years, is an umbrella organization really for a lot of the varied environmental education programs in the state. We offer 2 conferences a year, and part of the opportunities are not just hearing from those non-formal and formal educators, but it is the networking opportunity. And so many meetups happen at these conferences in which interdisciplinary projects take place, but also by bringing together formal and non-formal educators. So just getting out there and meeting people in the field that are already doing this stuff, you know, there's a plethora of it out there.
Thank you all. So another question is from Anne, who would like to know if there's been any pushback on this important initiative. And before I pass the mic, I just want to say to Anne, you know, I think in New Jersey, we, as the #1 school system in the United States of America for the 2nd year in a row, our teachers are so phenomenally talented. And the only pushback I've seen, given we all are living the same life here, we're all watching as the rains come more often, the temperatures fluctuate tremendously. We even had an earthquake this summer. We have power outages. I think we all accept the fact that there's something afoot here. But the only pushback I've had is something I think we're addressing today, and that's where a teacher may not have been educated themselves in this area and may have a little bit of a concern, but things like this are going to help. But anyway, and somebody else wants to tackle that, please do.
Just mentioned that the only pushback that I've heard is no pushback. It's just like exactly what you said, First Lady Murphy, is that people don't know where to start. The supervisors are looking to help their teachers, and the teachers are wondering, how am I going to do this? I think that's where the non-formals, as well as the formal educators that are in leadership positions, have an opportunity to jump in and assist those teachers.
And if I can just add to that as well, it is that teacher or educator professional development. It's really providing the resources and making sure that everybody is comfortable and how to integrate it. If we try to think that teaching climate is something else to put on top of what everybody is already teaching, then that's where we could potentially see some pushback. But really what we want to take a look at is how you integrate it with what you are already teaching so that it becomes another facet of the existing curriculum that you have. So there's lots of ways that we all can help each other to achieve that. And it really comes down to just making sure that people are prepared and know how to integrate across the board.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with those. Okay, so we're running out of time, so I'm going to lump 2 questions into one and please feel free to answer these. Frida would like to know, how do you recommend engaging older students to help teach and inspire younger students through student-led initiatives? 1. And Sally would like to know, how should educators best engage with business, industry, and higher education in this effort?
I'm going to just throw out a quick one. You know, one of the, again, many resources throughout the state, there's this incredible organization called the New Jersey Student Sustainability Coalition. It's actually a youth-run network of college, high school, and younger students across the state of New Jersey that are also, you know, leading the fight, not just with initiatives to combat climate change, but also to make sure that the educational components are being seen in the schools. So they're a great resource to check out.
And then the other thing to add on sort of the cross-curricular, looking at various ages. So there is a huge number of folks out there in the secondary world, in the colleges and universities across the state of New Jersey, that are now talking with educators in the K-12 and non-formal educators of how we all can work together in the climate space. So whether you're talking about Ramapo College or Stockton, or whether you're looking at Rutgers or any of the other really awesome secondary universities that we have here, those conversations are happening, and getting students that are older, that have a little bit more experience, to teach younger students. That's an incredibly powerful way to learn. So that is clearly something that we will be looking at and are looking at right now.
And if I may, just to piggyback on what Dale was saying, and I see Ashwani as one of our one of the attendees today, but New Jersey HEPS, which is the New Jersey Higher Education Partnership for Sustainability, check them out as well. They're doing a lot in this space.
Regarding connecting with businesses, it's just a matter of picking up the phone. I've done that numerous times in my teaching career, where I've had an idea and I said, you know what, I'm going to go find somebody that's going to help me. And it's just a matter of picking up the phone, and, you know, you're going to get a no or two here or there, but you never know who's going to jump on and say, yeah, I've got something for you. In my classroom, I have these 2 standard size solar panels. They just live there, and students love them, and we were able to integrate them. And I actually had the renewable energy people come in and teach the students about them. And it was just a matter of a phone call. So just let it go and jump in.
So listen, I think my little piece I'm going to add on here is that we have incredible panelists today. And so the resources are there for the asking. And I think you've just been given carte blanche to reach out to any of our panelists, as far as I can tell, based on the last comments. So, but listen, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this discussion today. You know, conversations such as this are so critical to the successful implementation of our climate change standards. Before I close, I want to share just one more thought with all of you. And that is, you know, our students are motivated. This generation of young people across the world is inspired and determined to fix the climate crisis. And this is what really gives me my greatest hope. Ask any teacher and he or she will tell you a motivated student can achieve absolutely anything. This is why, despite New Jersey warming at a rate faster than almost any other state, despite our disappearing shorelines, torrential downpours, and blazing hot summers, despite even the projected $10 billion climate change will cost the state of New Jersey, I am and remain incredibly optimistic. We're going to solve the climate crisis, and New Jersey is going to be a leader in the fight for our planet, as well as in the green economy that results from this absolute revolution. But we aren't going to do it alone. So as often as I say that I'm incredibly proud that New Jersey was the first one in the nation to achieve this landmark educational and environmental benchmark, I really cannot wait to see who follows next. Thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this panel, and to all of our incredible panelists. And thank you for being partners in our shared mission to make sure our children inherit an earth that has all of the beauty and resources that we have been fortunate enough to experience in our lifetimes. Thank you.
Great. This is Eileen. So in closing, we didn't get to everyone's questions, but we do hope to answer them separately. You'll get an email thanking you for joining the webinar, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those questions in there, or we'll just have to have another follow-up webinar. So we did prepare a slide that has some links to some of those organizations that Mark had put up, but Mark has so many more. So I'm going to update this slide with all of those links so that it can, those materials and resources can be available to everyone on this webinar and to your friends. So please feel free to share them. And thank you for your time. Thank you, First Lady, and this wonderful panel. And I hope that all of the attendees have learned a little bit more about the resources available to them. Classroom educators, you are not alone. There is ample resources, people who want to help, reach out to them. And with that, we will close the webinar. Thank you so much for attending. The Zoom goodbye.